"Get out of this luxury hotel," my daughter-in-law screamed loud enough for the marble walls to vibrate, while my son stood beside her with that cold, rehearsed look and said, "You are not welcome in our five-star hotel," as if I were a stranger trespassing on a world I paid for. The moment they threw $500 in my face like I was some unwanted burden, something inside me shifted. I stayed silent long enough for them to believe they had won. Then I simply picked up my phone, smiled, and said, "Security revoked the Carlton family's VIP access." They didn't know it yet, but their keycards would stop working at midnight, and the life of privilege they built on my generosity would collapse in ways they could never imagine. This story begins with humiliation in a glittering hotel lobby, but what follows is a trail of secrets, betrayals, and a revenge they never saw coming. As you watch, you will uncover the truth behind why my own children believed they could treat me like disposable luggage, and how one small moment of disrespect cracked open a much larger scheme. Stay with me because every detail matters: the hushed conversations, the forged signatures, the hidden accounts, and the final twist that will turn their perfect world inside out. If you think the confrontation in the lobby was explosive, wait until you see what happened when midnight arrived and their access, their confidence, and their entire plan crumbled right in front of them. This is the moment a quiet father stopped being silent and started taking everything back. My name is Leonard Grayson. I'm 72 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent 40 years building bridges and highways across this country. I buried my wife Grace 5 years ago, and since then I have learned that the hardest structures to maintain are not made of steel and concrete, they are made of family. I should have known better than to come here tonight. That thought crossed my mind as I pushed through the revolving doors of the Grandview Hotel, its lobby gleaming with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that scattered light like frozen raindrops. But hope is a stubborn thing, especially for a father who still remembers teaching his son to ride a bicycle, still remembers staying up all night when that same son had a fever, still remembers selling his family home to pay for that boy's college education. Hope made me believe that perhaps tonight could be different. Perhaps Adrian would smile when he saw me. Perhaps we could share a meal and talk about something other than money or obligations or the woman who had slowly built a wall between us. I paused in the lobby, my eyes catching a large seascape painting mounted near the reception desk. I remember choosing that painting 20 years ago, back when this hotel was just blueprints and promises, and a group of investors taking a chance on a young developer's vision. I had been one of those investors, a silent partner who preferred anonymity over recognition. An older staff member walked past me and, for just a moment, our eyes met. He gave me a subtle nod, the kind of acknowledgement that said he knew exactly who I was, even if no one else in this building did. I nodded back and continued toward the restaurant. The Grandview's main dining room was everything luxury promised: white tablecloths, soft piano music, the quiet murmur of wealthy guests enjoying expensive wine. I spotted Adrian immediately. My son sat at a premium table near the windows, his wife Marissa beside him. Both of them dressed as if they belonged on the cover of a magazine. There were other people at the table too, business associates by the look of their suits and careful smiles. My heart lifted. Maybe I could just say hello. Maybe I could meet his colleagues, show him I supported his career, remind him that I was still his father, and I was still proud of him. I was 10 feet from the table when Marissa saw me. Her face transformed. The polished smile vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp. She stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor, and her voice cut through the piano music like a blade. "What are you doing here?" I stopped walking. "Marissa, I just wanted to—" "Are you stalking us now?" She was loud, deliberately loud, heads turned throughout the restaurant. "This is a private dinner with important clients, and you show up looking like—" She gestured at my simple button-down shirt and khaki pants with visible disgust, like some homeless person wandering in off the street. "I only wanted to see Adrian," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I thought maybe we could talk after your dinner." Marissa reached into her purse and pulled out a handful of cash. She threw it at my feet. $500 scattered across the polished floor like trash. "Take it and get out," she hissed. "This is a 5-star hotel, not a shelter for lonely old men. You're embarrassing us." I looked past her to my son. Adrian had not moved. He sat with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine. The boy I had raised, the child I had sacrificed everything for, sat there like a stranger watching a scene that had nothing to do with him. "Adrian," I said softly. "Son." He finally looked at me, and there was nothing in his eyes, no warmth, no recognition of the man who had loved him unconditionally for 45 years. "Dad, you shouldn't have come," he said flatly. "You're not welcome here." The restaurant had gone silent. Every guest was watching. I could feel their stares like heat on my skin. Slowly, carefully, I bent down and picked up the scattered bills. My hands trembled, but I did not let them see my face crumble. I straightened my back, folded the money, and placed it in my pocket. Then I walked toward the exit with my head held high, because dignity was the only thing I had left, and I would not let them take that too. In the lobby, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. "Victor, this is Leonard. I need you to handle something for me tonight. The Carlton party and the presidential suite revoked their VIP access immediately." I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the wheel, even though something inside me had cracked open and was bleeding where no one could see. The $500 sat folded in my pocket like a wound. I thought about throwing it out the window, letting it scatter across the highway for strangers to find. But Grace would have told me that was foolish. Grace would have said money is just paper until you decide what it means. So I kept it, and I drove through the dark streets of the city I had helped build, and I tried not to think about the look in my son's eyes when he told me I was not welcome. My apartment was small and quiet, the kind of place people expected a widower to live. 2 bedrooms, one of which I had converted into a study filled with engineering books and photographs of bridges I had designed. The other bedroom still had Grace's reading chair by the window because I could not bring myself to move it. I sat down in my own chair across from hers and looked at the empty seat where she used to curl up with her novels, and I wondered what she would say if she could see what our family had become. It was nearly midnight when my phone rang. Victor Hale's name appeared on the screen. "It's done," he said without preamble. "Their key cards were deactivated at 11:47. Mrs. Carlton made quite a scene at the front desk. She demanded to speak with management, threatened lawsuits, called our night staff incompetent. I handled it personally." I closed my eyes. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that there was a security concern involving a stakeholder dispute and hotel policy required their immediate departure." Victor paused. "Your son asked what stakeholders I was referring to. I informed him that his father holds significant interests in this property. I believe he was genuinely surprised, Mr. Grayson. He had no idea." Of course he had no idea. Adrian knew nothing about my investments, my silent partnerships, the quiet ways I had built a modest fortune over 40 years of careful planning. He knew only what Marissa had told him to believe, that I was a retired engineer, living on a pension, a burden to be managed, an embarrassment to be hidden. "There's something else," Victor continued. "Someone in the restaurant tonight recorded Mrs. Carlton's outburst. The video is circulating on social media. It's gaining attention." After we hung up, I found the video myself. It was not difficult by then. It had been shared thousands of times with captions like, "Rich woman throws money at elderly man," and "Someone identify this poor father." I watched my own humiliation play out on a 6-inch screen, saw myself bend down to pick up those scattered bills, saw Adrian sitting motionless while his wife screamed at me. The comments were a strange kind of comfort. Thousands of strangers were defending me, calling Marissa cruel and heartless, demanding to know who I was so they could help me. One comment said, "That man has more dignity in his little finger than that woman has in her whole body." Another said, "I hope he's someone important and she just destroyed herself." I wondered if Marissa had seen the video yet. I wondered if she understood that the internet never forgets, that her perfectly curated image was now forever stained by 60 seconds of recorded cruelty. I wondered if Adrian was reading those comments too, seeing his father through the eyes of strangers who recognized what he had somehow forgotten, that I was a human being who deserved basic respect. I set down my phone and picked up a photograph from the side table. Grace smiled at me from behind the glass, her eyes bright with the warmth that had sustained me for 43 years of marriage. She had warned me about Marissa. Not directly, because Grace was too kind for accusations, but in small ways, a worried look when Marissa interrupted me at dinner, a gentle hand on my arm. When Adrian canceled another visit, a quiet comment late at night. "I'm afraid she's taking him away from us, Leonard. I don't know how to stop it." I should have listened. I should have fought harder while Grace was still alive to fight beside me. But I had believed that love was enough, that Adrian would eventually see the truth, that family bonds could not be broken by one ambitious woman with a gift for manipulation. I had been wrong about many things, but I was not wrong about everything. I still had resources. I still had allies. And I still had time to show my son exactly who his father really was. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I did not recognize. I opened it and read the words twice before their meaning settled into my mind. "Mr. Grayson, my father always said you saved our family. Now it's my turn. VH. VH, Victor Hale." I stared at the initials, searching my memory for a connection I could not quite grasp. Victor was in his early 40s, which meant his father would have been my contemporary, a colleague perhaps, or a client from my engineering days. The name Hale stirred something in the back of my mind, a faint echo of a story I had nearly forgotten. But the details would not come, and my eyes were too tired to keep searching. I looked at Grace's photograph one more time. "What did you set in motion, my love?" I whispered to her silent smile. "What else did you prepare that I don't know about yet?" The photograph offered no answers, but somewhere in this city, Victor Hale was watching over me for reasons I did not yet understand. And somewhere in a hotel, they could no longer enter my son, and his wife were learning that the old man they had humiliated was not as powerless as they believed. I turned off the lights and sat in the darkness waiting for morning to bring whatever came next. Sleep did not come that night. I sat in my chair until the first gray light of dawn crept through the curtains, my mind turning over memories I had tried for years to bury. Victor Hale's message glowed in my thoughts like an ember that would not die. His father had said I saved their family, but I could not remember saving anyone. I could barely remember saving myself during those long years when survival meant working until my bones ached and my hands shook from exhaustion, all while watching my wife fight a battle neither of us could win. Grace was 32 when the doctors found it, a chronic autoimmune condition that would require years of treatments, medications, specialist hospital stays. Adrian was only 10 years old, too young to understand why his mother spent weeks at a time in sterile rooms, connected to machines, too young to know that his father was drowning in medical bills that grew faster than any salary could match. I was working as a civil engineer, then designing highways for the state transportation department. Good work, steady pay, but nowhere near enough for what we faced. So I took a second job as a night security guard at a warehouse across town. I would finish my engineering shift at 5 in the afternoon, come home to make dinner for Adrian, help him with his homework, put him to bed, and then drive to the warehouse to walk empty corridors until dawn. 4 hours of sleep if I was lucky. Then I would do it all again. For 8 years I lived like that. 8 years of watching my wife suffer and my son grow up in fragments between my shifts. I sold our house, the 3-bedroom colonial where Adrian had taken his first steps, where Grace and I had planted roses in the backyard, where we had dreamed of growing old together, and moved us into a small apartment so I could put the equity toward her treatments and Adrian's college fund. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself things would get better. And eventually they did. Grace's condition stabilized. Adrian graduated high school, then college, then business school. He became successful, confident, everything I had sacrificed for him to become. And he was grateful. That is what I need to remember now when the bitterness threatens to consume me. Before Marissa, Adrian was grateful. He visited every Sunday, called every evening just to check in, sent cards on Father's Day with handwritten notes that said things like, "I know what you gave up for me, Dad. I will never forget." He brought girlfriends home to meet us, asked for my advice on career decisions, helped me move furniture when Grace's mobility declined. He was my son and I was his father, and the bond between us felt unbreakable. Then he met Marissa in 2005. She was beautiful, ambitious, polished in ways that made Grace uneasy from the first introduction. I dismissed my wife's concerns as maternal protectiveness. Marissa came from money, had connections, spoke 3 languages, and looked at Adrian like he was the center of her universe. What father would not want that for his son? They married within a year, a lavish wedding that Marissa's family paid for because I certainly could not afford it. I stood in my rented tuxedo and watched my son promise to love this woman forever, and I believed that his happiness was all that mattered. The changes came slowly. Weekly visits became monthly. Daily calls became weekly, then bi-weekly, then only when Adrian needed something. Marissa always had reasons. They were traveling for her business. They were renovating their new house. They were exhausted from social obligations I was never invited to attend. Grace would sit by the phone on Sunday evenings waiting for a call that rarely came, and I would see the hurt in her eyes that she tried so hard to hide from me. "He's busy building his life," I would tell her. "He'll come back to us when things settle down." But things never settled down. The distance only grew, and by the time Grace died 5 years ago, Adrian had become a stranger who sent flowers to her funeral but could not find time to help me sort through her belongings. I drove to the cemetery that Sunday morning, as I did every week regardless of weather or health or how little sleep I had gotten. Grace's headstone was simple gray granite, just the way she wanted. I knelt on the grass and told her everything. The hotel, the money thrown at my feet, the coldness in Adrian's eyes, the video that was probably still circulating online. "You always worried about Marissa," I whispered to the carved letters of her name. "You saw something I refused to see. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I let her take him from us." The wind stirred the leaves of a nearby oak tree, and for a moment I imagined it was Grace answering me. Then my phone rang, shattering the silence. The name on the screen was Lila Warren, the attorney Grace had insisted I hire years ago to manage our estate planning. Lila had been Grace's close friend since their college days, and she had promised my wife that she would watch over me after Grace was gone. I answered the call expecting routine paperwork or a question about tax documents. Instead, Lila's voice was tight with urgency. "Leonard, we need to meet. Today, if possible. Someone has been accessing your secondary account, the one you set up for family emergencies. There have been large withdrawals over the past 14 months, $47,000 total." My chest tightened. "Withdrawals? I haven't touched that account in years." There was a pause. When Lila spoke again, her voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Leonard, the transactions trace back to your son's personal accounts. Adrian has been siphoning money for over a year. We need to talk about what you want to do." Lila Warren's office occupied the 14th floor of a downtown building I had helped design 30 years ago. I remembered the blueprints, the calculations, the pride I felt when the steel skeleton rose against the skyline. Now I rode the elevator to meet with my wife's oldest friend, carrying the weight of a betrayal I still could not fully comprehend. My own son, $47,000, 14 months of lies. Lila was waiting for me in her conference room, a stack of documents already spread across the polished table. She was 52 years old, silver streaking through her dark hair, her face carrying the kind of sharp intelligence that made her one of the most respected estate attorneys in the city. Grace had trusted her completely, and in the years since my wife's death, Lila had become something like family to me, the sister I never had, the guardian Grace had appointed to watch over me when she could no longer do it herself. "Sit down, Leonard," she said gently. "This is going to be difficult to hear." I sat. She slid the first document toward me, a bank statement from my secondary account, the emergency fund I had established years ago and rarely touched. The account I had added Adrian to as an authorized user when Emily was born, so he could access money for his daughter's needs if something ever happened to me. A gesture of trust, a father's faith in his son. "The withdrawals started 14 months ago," Lila explained, her finger tracing a column of transactions. "Small amounts, at first 500 here, 1,000 there. Easy to miss if you weren't looking closely, but over time they escalated. 3,000 in March of last year, 5,000 in July, 8,000 in November." She looked up at me. "The total is $47,216. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. "Where did the money go?" Lila hesitated. "I had a forensic accountant trace the transfers. None of it went to Emily. Not a single dollar." She pulled out another document. "Adrian has been struggling financially for over 2 years. His company took losses during the market downturn, and he made some poor decisions trying to recover, specifically gambling. High-stakes poker games at private clubs, online sports betting, a disastrous weekend in Atlantic City. He owes money to people who don't accept excuses. Gambling. My son, who I had taught to save every penny, who I had lectured about financial responsibility while working 2 jobs to keep our family afloat, had become a gambler. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. There's more, Lila continued. A significant portion of the funds, nearly $20,000, went to cover losses from investment ventures registered in Marissa's name. Shell companies, Leonard. Businesses that existed on paper but never actually operated. She was funneling money somewhere, and when those ventures collapsed, Adrian used your account to fill the holes. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing through implications I did not want to face. How long have you known about this? I've been monitoring your account since Grace asked me to write before she passed. I noticed the irregularities 6 months ago, but wanted to gather enough evidence before bringing it to you. Lila's voice softened. I also wanted to give you time to grieve, Leonard. You had just lost your wife. I didn't want to destroy your relationship with your son on top of everything else. What are my options? She straightened, shifting into her professional demeanor. Legally, this constitutes breach of fiduciary duty. Adrian was given authorized access for a specific purpose, Emily's welfare, and he violated that trust for personal gain. We could pursue civil action to recover the funds. Depending on how aggressively we present the evidence, we might even have grounds for fraud charges. I considered this for a long moment. The lawyer in my mind calculated damages and remedies, but the father in my heart could not stop seeing Adrian at 10 years old crying because his mother was in the hospital again, asking me why bad things happen to good people. I had no answer then. I had no answer now. Not yet, I finally said. I need to understand how deep this goes. Prepare the documentation, but take no action. I want to know everything before I decide anything. Lila nodded, unsurprised. She knew me well enough to expect caution over impulse. There's something else I think you should know, something I discovered while investigating Marissa's shell companies. I looked up. What? You asked me once years ago to look into her background. I didn't find much at the time. Her family kept a low profile, and she had scrubbed most of her history from public records. But these financial irregularities gave me new threads to pull. Lila paused, choosing her words carefully. Her father is still alive, Leonard. His name is Thomas Harris. He's 78 years old, living in a nursing home in Vermont. He's been there for 14 years. The information landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples I could not yet trace. 14 years, Marissa told Adrian her father died before Emily was born. She lied. Thomas Harris is very much alive, though. From what I've gathered, he might as well be dead to her. Marissa obtained sole power of attorney over his assets shortly after her mother passed away. Within 6 months, she sold his house, liquidated his investments, and placed him in a long-term care facility 300 miles from anyone who knew him. Lila's expression hardened. His former neighbors told my investigator that Thomas was healthy when she moved him. Not senile, not incapacitated, just old and alone and trusting his daughter to take care of him. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She did it for the money. She did it for control. The money was just a bonus. Lila leaned forward. Leonard, I'm telling you this because I see a pattern. Marissa isolated her father, took everything he had, and erased him from her life. She's been isolating you from Adrian for almost 20 years, and now she's accessing your finances through your son. She held my gaze. I think you need to consider the possibility that what she did to her father, she's planning to do to you. I left Lila's office with a folder of documents and a heart full of questions I was not ready to answer. The elevator descended 14 floors, and with each passing number, I felt the world I thought I understood crumbling around me. My son was a thief. My daughter-in-law was something far worse, and somewhere in Vermont, an old man sat forgotten in a nursing home abandoned by the same woman who was now circling me like a predator waiting for weakness. My phone rang as I stepped onto the sidewalk. The name on the screen made my breath catch. Emily. Grandpa. Her voice was thin, frightened. Can I come see you tomorrow? I found something. Something about Mom. She paused, and I heard her swallow hard. I think you need to see it before it's too late. Emily arrived at my apartment the next afternoon, her hands clutching a small backpack like it contained something precious and dangerous. She was only 16, but the girl who stood in my doorway looked older. Somehow, her young face carrying shadows that did not belong there. I remembered her as a baby. Remembered the first time Adrian placed her in my arms. Remembered the way her tiny fingers had wrapped around my thumb and held on as if she already knew that some people in this world could be trusted and others could not. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, stepping aside to let her pass. She moved into my living room with the nervous energy of someone who had been carrying a heavy secret for too long. Her eyes darted around the apartment, lingering on the photograph of Grace that sat on the mantel before she finally settled onto the edge of the sofa. I sat across from her and waited. Whatever she had come to tell me, she needed to find her own way to the words. "I'm sorry, Grandpa." She began, her voice barely above a whisper. "For what happened at the hotel. For the way Mom treated you. For Dad just sitting there and doing nothing." Her hands twisted in her lap. I wanted to say something. I wanted to stand up and tell everyone that you're not what she made you look like. But I was scared. I'm always scared around her. You don't need to apologize for your parents, Emily. Yes, I do. Because they won't. She looked up at me and I saw something fierce burning behind the fear in her eyes. "I'm not stupid, Grandpa. I know what she is. I've known for a long time." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I've been watching her for over a year now, listening when she thinks I'm not paying attention, looking at things she leaves lying around." Emily reached into her backpack and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it out to me like an offering. I started saving everything I found, screenshots, photos of documents, recordings. I took the drive, turning it over in my fingers. Such a small thing to contain so much potential destruction. "What's on here?" "Emails between Mom and some lawyer. They've been discussing options for putting you in a nursing home. She calls it elderly care placement. But I read what they wrote, Grandpa. She's trying to figure out how to get control of your money by claiming you have dementia." Emily's voice cracked. "You don't have dementia. You're the sharpest person I know." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though Lila had already warned me this might be coming. Hearing it from my granddaughter, seeing the evidence she had risked so much to gather, made it real in a way I could not deny. "There's more," Emily continued. "Text messages between Mom and someone I don't know. She talks about Dad like he's a tool she's using. She called him useless. She said she only needs him until—" Emily paused, swallowing hard, "until they secure the old man's assets. That's you, Grandpa. She's been planning this for years." I set the USB drive on the table between us, my mind racing through the implications of everything she was telling me. "Emily, why didn't you come to me sooner?" "Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. Because I was afraid of what she would do if she found out." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and suddenly she was not a brave young woman gathering evidence against her own mother. She was just a child overwhelmed by a truth too heavy for anyone her age to carry alone. And because I found something else, something that made me realize this isn't just about money. She reached into her backpack again and pulled out a photograph, its edges worn from handling. She handed it to me, and I found myself looking at a man I did not recognize. Elderly, white-haired, smiling at the camera with a birthday cake in front of him. The date stamp in the corner read June 2009. "That's Thomas Harris," Emily said. "Mom's father, my other grandfather." She met my eyes. "Mom told me he died before I was born. But that photo is from 2009. Grandpa, I was already 1 year old. She lied about him being dead." I stared at the photograph, remembering what Lila had told me just yesterday. Thomas Harris, alive in a Vermont nursing home abandoned by his daughter 14 years ago. Emily had discovered the same truth through her own investigation, and the horror of it was written across her face. "I think she did something to him," Emily whispered. "I think she got rid of him so she could take everything he had, and now she's going to do the same thing to you." I reached across and took her hand, squeezing gently. "I won't let that happen." Emily wiped her tears with her free hand, then looked at me with an expression that was equal parts hope and terror. "There's more on that drive, Grandpa. Audio recordings I made when Mom was on the phone. In one of them she says something that made me feel sick." She hesitated, as if speaking the words aloud would make them more real. She says, "I handled my father. I can handle his. I think she's planning something terrible, and I think it's going to happen soon." I called Lila before Emily had even left my apartment. Within 2 hours, we were sitting together in her office, the USB drive connected to her secure computer, its contents spreading across the screen like evidence at a crime scene. Emily had been thorough. Emails, screenshots, financial documents, and 3 audio files that would change everything I thought I knew about the woman my son had married. Lila played the first recording. Marissa's voice filled the room, casual and confident, speaking to someone whose responses we could not hear. "You have to understand how these things work," she was saying. "I learned from experience. Difficult elderly relatives require a specific approach. You can't give them time to think or plan or talk to lawyers. You move quickly, get the diagnosis on paper, and then everything else falls into place." There was a pause, then laughter, cold and sharp like breaking glass. My father didn't even fight back, signed everything I put in front of him once the dementia diagnosis was official. The doctors were very cooperative once they understood the situation, and now he's comfortable in his little room in Vermont, and I never have to think about him again. Lila stopped the recording. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. I had suspected Marissa was capable of cruelty, but hearing her describe what she had done to her own father with such casual satisfaction made my stomach turn. This was not a woman who had made difficult decisions under pressure. This was a predator who had found a system to exploit and perfected it. "I did some deeper research after our last meeting," Lila said quietly. "Thomas Harris was diagnosed with early-stage cognitive decline in March of 2009. The diagnosis came from a Dr. William Reeves, a geriatric specialist in Hartford. Within 3 months, Marissa had obtained full power of attorney. Within 6 months, Thomas was placed in Shady Pines Nursing Facility, and his assets, the house, the investments, everything had been liquidated. And the doctor retired that same year, moved to Florida." Lila pulled up another document on her screen. "I found something interesting in his financial records. Shortly before his retirement, Dr. Reeves received a substantial gift from an anonymous donor. $50,000 routed through a charitable foundation that no longer exists." She looked at me. "I can't prove Marissa paid him to exaggerate or fabricate the diagnosis, but the timing is suspicious and the pattern matches what Emily found in those recordings." I sat back in my chair, letting the full weight of the revelation settle over me. For almost 20 years, I had watched Marissa separate my son from his family, had felt the slow erosion of our relationship without understanding its cause. I had blamed Adrian for being weak, blamed myself for not being interesting enough to hold his attention, blamed the natural drift of generations for the growing silence between us. But it was none of those things. It was her. Deliberate, calculated, patient. She had isolated Adrian the same way she had isolated her father, and now she was preparing to do the same to me. She destroyed her own father to get his money, I said slowly, each word heavy with understanding. She turned my son against me, and now she's planning to do the same thing to me. The nursing home, the dementia diagnosis, the power of attorney, it's the same playbook. Lila nodded. "Leonard, we need to act. If she's already consulting lawyers about elderly care placement for you, she's further along than we realized." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city I had helped build. 40 years of bridges and highways, of structures designed to withstand storms and earthquakes and the slow decay of time. I had spent my life creating things that would outlast me. I would not let Marissa tear down everything I had left. "Grace knew," I said quietly. "She tried to warn me for years, but I didn't want to believe my son had married a monster. I kept making excuses, kept hoping things would get better." I turned back to Lila. "Before she died, Grace made me promise that if things got bad, I would protect myself. I think it's time I kept that promise." I had not opened the drawer in my desk at home for 5 years. I had not been ready to face what Grace had left behind. But that evening alone in my apartment, I finally pulled out the manila envelope that had been waiting for me since her death. Her handwriting on the front was still as familiar as my own heartbeat. "For Leonard, when you're ready to fight." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope and pulled out a letter, its pages covered in Grace's careful script. I read the first line, and suddenly she was with me again. Her voice in my ear, her love reaching across the divide of death to protect me one last time. "My darling, if you're reading this, then I was right about Marissa. I've spent the last 2 years preparing for this moment." I read Grace's letter 3 times that night, and each time the words blurred through fresh tears. She had written it during her final months when I thought she was sleeping or resting, or simply fading away. I thought I had been protecting her from stress. I never imagined she had been protecting me. "My darling Leonard," she wrote, "if you're reading this, then I was right about Marissa, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to fight beside you. I have watched her for years now, watched her slowly build walls between you and Adrian, watched her isolate our son from everyone who loved him before she came along. I recognize the pattern because I researched it. There's a term psychologists use, coercive control. It's what abusers do to their victims. They don't use fists. They use distance dependency and doubt. Marissa has been doing this to Adrian since the day they married, and through him, she has been doing it to you." Grace described moments I had overlooked or explained away, the way Marissa would schedule conflicts whenever I planned to visit, the subtle comments that made Adrian feel guilty for spending time with his father, the financial entanglements that kept my son dependent on her approval for every decision. "I couldn't prove anything while I was alive," Grace continued. "Marissa is too careful, too patient, but I've left you tools, my love. Use them when you need them, and when the time comes, don't hesitate. Don't let kindness be your weakness. Fight for yourself the way you always fought for me and Adrian." The letter ended with instructions to visit Evelyn Brooks, Grace's closest friend for over 40 years. "Evelyn knows everything. I trusted her with my fears when I couldn't burden you with them. Go to her when you're ready. She's been waiting." I drove to Evelyn's house the next morning, a modest colonial in the suburbs where she and her late husband had raised their children. Evelyn was 70 years old, her white hair pulled back in a simple bun, her eyes sharp and knowing as she opened the door and saw me standing there. "You've read the letter," she said. It was not a question. "How long have you known?" "Since before Grace died." Evelyn stepped aside to let me in. "She made me promise not to say anything until you came to me asking for help. She knew you would need time. She knew you would need to see the truth for yourself before you could accept it." We sat in her living room, surrounded by photographs of grandchildren and memories of lives well lived. Evelyn reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. I recognized Grace's handwriting, my name on the front. "She gave me this 5 years ago," Evelyn explained. "Sealed instructions. I was only supposed to open it if you came to me asking questions about Marissa." She handed me the envelope. Inside, I found a key and a handwritten note listing Lila Warren's private phone number. "Grace hired Lila herself, paid her retainer from a separate account you didn't know about. She wanted a lawyer watching over you after she was gone, someone who would notice if things started going wrong." I stared at the key in my hand. "What is this for?" "A safety deposit box at First National. Grace set it up during her last year. Everything you need is inside: financial documents, legal papers, evidence she gathered about Marissa's past." Evelyn's voice softened. "She spent her final weeks preparing for this, Leonard. Hours on the phone with lawyers and accountants and bankers while you thought she was resting. She knew she was dying, but she refused to leave you unprotected." The tears came again, and I didn't try to stop them. All those months when I thought I was caring for my dying wife, she had been caring for me. Building walls I could not see, laying traps I did not know existed, loving me in ways that would outlast her own breath. "She said something to me near the end," Evelyn continued quietly. "She said Marissa will wait until I'm gone, then she'll strike. Leonard is too kind to see it coming, so I'll see it for him." That's what she did, Leonard. She saw everything coming, and she prepared for it. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, struggling to compose myself. "I don't know how to thank you, Evelyn, for keeping her secrets, for waiting all these years." Evelyn took my hand in both of hers, her grip warm and steady. "There's one more thing. Grace recorded something, a video. She made it during her final weeks when she still had the strength to sit up and speak clearly." She reached into the drawer again and pulled out a small flash drive. "She made me promise not to tell you about this unless Marissa made her move. She wanted you to hear her voice when you needed strength most." I took the flash drive, feeling its weight like a sacred relic. "Have you watched it?" "No. Grace said it was only for you." Evelyn squeezed my hand, but she also said something else. She said, "Save it for the moment when everyone needs to see who Marissa really is." I think she meant for you to use it publicly, Leonard, when the time is right. The key Evelyn had given me opened a safety deposit box at First National Bank, a small steel container that held the final pieces of Grace's carefully constructed puzzle. Lila accompanied me to the bank the following morning, her presence both professional and personal. She had known about this box for years, had helped Grace fill it with documents I was only now ready to see. As the bank officer led us to the vault and left us alone with the box, I felt Grace's presence as strongly as if she were standing beside me. Inside, I found a thick folder of documents that would have seemed impossible just a week ago. The first was a certificate of ownership for a limited liability company called Coastal Investments, LLC. According to the paperwork, I held a 15% stake in the Grandview Hotel chain, the same chain that operated the hotel where Marissa had thrown money at my feet. I stared at the numbers, memories flooding back. 20 years ago, a young developer named Marcus Webb had approached me about investing in his vision for a boutique hotel concept. I had believed in his idea and written a check for $50,000, money I could barely afford at the time. Grace had supported the decision, even though it meant delaying our own home renovations. That investment had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. "You never told Adrian about this?" Lila asked, watching my face as I processed the information. "I never told anyone. It was a private investment, something Grace and I decided to keep separate from our regular finances. We reinvested the dividends for years, never touched the principal." I shook my head slowly. I honestly forgot how much it had grown. The next documents were property deeds for 2 rental properties in the suburbs. Small apartment buildings I had purchased decades ago as retirement security. They generated steady passive income that flowed into accounts Adrian knew nothing about. And beneath those deeds was a detailed financial portfolio summary showing assets totaling over $2.3 million. I sat back overwhelmed. I knew we had saved well over the years, but Grace restructured everything, Lila explained. 2 years before she died, she contacted me and several estate attorneys. She was worried about what might happen to you after she was gone, and she wanted to create what she called an asset protection fortress. Lila pulled out another document, a thick legal filing with multiple signatures. "All of your major assets were moved into irrevocable trusts. The structures are designed so that you have full access to everything during your lifetime. But upon your death, the assets pass directly to the Emily Grace Trust." "Emily," I whispered, my granddaughter's name combined with my wife's. Grace named the trust herself. She wanted Emily protected, but she also wanted to ensure that you were protected first. Lila pointed to a specific clause in the document. "Read this carefully, Leonard. It's the key to everything." I read the words aloud. "Any family member who demonstrates financial exploitation, abuse, or mistreatment of Leonard Grayson shall be permanently excluded from any inheritance or beneficial interest in the trust assets." The implications hit me like a wave. Adrian's unauthorized withdrawals from my account, Marissa's plans for nursing home placement and conservatorship, the public humiliation at the hotel. Every action they had taken over the past year had been documented, witnessed, recorded. They had already disqualified themselves from inheriting anything, and they did not even know it. "Grace anticipated all of this," Lila said quietly. "She couldn't prove what Marissa was planning while she was alive, but she built a legal structure that would expose and punish it after the fact. The Carltons think they're waiting for a frail old man to die so they can inherit his modest pension and savings. They have no idea that your true wealth is substantial, that they've already violated the terms that would have allowed them to benefit from it, and that Grace built walls they cannot penetrate." I closed my eyes and let out a breath I had been holding for what felt like years. All this time, I had felt powerless. All this time, I had believed I was alone against forces I could not fight. But Grace had been fighting for me from beyond the grave, using the only weapons available to the dying foresight planning and an unshakable love that refused to let death be the end of her protection. "Grace, you brilliant woman," I murmured. "You were always 3 steps ahead of everyone." Lila began gathering the documents to take back to her office for safekeeping when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. I watched her expression shift from curiosity to surprise to something I could not quite read. "I understand," she said finally. "I'll let him know." She ended the call and turned to me with a strange look in her eyes. "That was Victor Hale, the general manager from the Grandview Hotel." "I remember. What did he want?" "He wants to meet with you, privately. He says he has information about the Carltons, that we need to hear information he's been gathering for some time." Lila paused, her brow furrowed. "And Leonard, he said something else. He said his father's name was Raymond Hale." She watched my face carefully. "Does that mean anything to you?" Raymond Hale. The name echoed through decades of memory, pulling me back to a time I had nearly forgotten. A colleague, a friend, a man whose family had faced ruin until someone quietly intervened. Yes, I said slowly. It means everything. Victor Hale was already waiting when I arrived at a small cafe 3 blocks from my apartment. He had chosen a corner booth away from the windows, private enough for the conversation we needed to have. I studied him as I approached early 40s, composed, professional, but with something in his eyes that spoke of deeper currents beneath the surface. He stood as I reached the table and extended his hand with a respect that felt almost reverential. "Mr. Grayson, thank you for meeting me." "You said your father was Raymond Hale." I sat across from him, searching his face for traces of the man I had known decades ago. "I haven't heard that name in 25 years. Victor nodded slowly. "My father spoke of you often. He said you were the most honorable man he ever knew." He paused, gathering his thoughts. 25 years ago, my father's construction business failed. Bad contracts, worse partners, a recession that hit at exactly the wrong moment. He was facing bankruptcy. We were going to lose our house, my college fund, everything my parents had built over 30 years. I remembered. Raymond had been my colleague at the engineering firm, a man who dreamed of starting his own company and finally took the leap. When things fell apart, he came to me not for money, but for advice. He was too proud to ask for help directly. But I could see the desperation in his eyes, the weight of a man watching his family's future crumble. "He never asked me for anything," I said quietly. "No, he told me that too. He said you just showed up one day with a check for $50,000. You told him it was an investment in his future, that you believed in him, and that the only condition was that he never tell anyone where the money came from." Victor's voice thickened with emotion. "That money saved us, Mr. Grayson. My father rebuilt his business. He put me through college. He died 3 years ago, a successful man surrounded by his family, at peace with his life. And before he died, he made me promise one thing." "What was that?" He said, "If Leonard Grayson ever needs help, you help him. That man saved our family when no one else would. You owe him a debt that can never be fully repaid." Victor met my eyes. "When I became general manager of the Grandview Hotel 2 years ago and discovered you were a silent partner, I knew it was my chance to honor that promise. I've been watching over you ever since. When I noticed your daughter-in-law's behavior, I started documenting everything. I've been reporting my concerns to Attorney Warren for the past 8 months. So that was how Lila had known about the account irregularities before I did. Victor had been her eyes and ears, a guardian angel I never knew existed, repaying a kindness I had nearly forgotten. "There's more," Victor continued, pulling out his phone. "I've been monitoring Mrs. Carlton's activities since the hotel incident. She's been making calls to nursing homes, specifically memory care facilities. She's been asking about placement procedures for an elderly relative with early-stage dementia." He swiped to a recording app. "I managed to capture one of her phone conversations. I think you need to hear it." He pressed play. Marissa's voice filled the space between us, confident and calculating. "The old man's mind is going. Anyone can see it. We just need the proper documentation, a diagnosis from a cooperative physician, and we can get control of everything. Once we have conservatorship, he won't be able to make decisions for himself anymore. It's really quite straightforward when you know the process." Victor stopped the recording. My hands had clenched into fists beneath the table, but I kept my face neutral. I had suspected this was coming, but hearing her speak so casually about stealing my autonomy, my dignity, my very identity, it took every ounce of self-control not to let the rage consume me. "She's also consulted with a lawyer about conservatorship proceedings," Victor added. "I have the attorney's name if you need it." I thanked Victor and drove home, my mind churning with plans and countermeasures. Grace had built the fortress, Lila had prepared the legal weapons, Victor had provided the intelligence. Now I needed to give Marissa enough rope to hang herself. That evening they came. Adrian and Marissa arrived at my apartment unannounced, all smiles and false warmth. Marissa swept in wearing an expensive dress and a perfume that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. She kissed my cheek as if she had not thrown money at my feet a week ago, as if she had not screamed at me to leave a hotel I partly owned. "Dad, we've been so worried about you," she cooed. "Living alone at your age, managing bills and appointments, it must be overwhelming." I played my part. I let my hands tremble slightly. I repeated a question I had already asked. I let confusion cloud my expression. "Worried about what?" Adrian stood near the door, silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. He would not look at me. Whatever remained of my son beneath Marissa's control, it was not strong enough to meet his father's gaze. Marissa produced a document from her designer handbag. "We've prepared something to help you, Dad. Just a simple financial power of attorney. It would let us assist with your bills, your accounts, the little details that become so difficult as we get older." She placed it on my coffee table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's for your own protection." I picked up the document with shaking hands, an act though Marissa did not know it. I squinted at the pages, turned them slowly. Let my brow furrow in manufactured confusion. "I don't understand these legal things," I mumbled. "This is all so complicated. Let me think about it. Come back next week." Marissa's smile flickered, a flash of impatience quickly suppressed. "Of course, Dad. Take all the time you need." She left the document on my table as if by accident. "We'll come back on Sunday to answer any questions." After they left, I examined every page with clear eyes and a steady hand. The fine print was buried on page 7, nestled between paragraphs of legal jargon designed to obscure its meaning. Authorization for full asset management and liquidation authority. The power to sell my property, empty my accounts, and transfer my assets, all without my knowledge or consent. This was not about helping with bills. This was about taking everything I had. I photographed every page and sent them to Lila with a single message: "They've made their move. Now we make ours." Lila called an emergency meeting the next morning. We gathered in her office, Victor, Lila, and myself, 3 people united by circumstance and a shared determination to see justice done. The power of attorney document I had photographed lay spread across the conference table, its predatory clauses highlighted in yellow marker. Lila had spent the night analyzing every word, and her expression told me she had found exactly what we expected. "This document is a masterpiece of deception," she said, tapping the highlighted sections. "On the surface, it reads like standard financial assistance authorization. But buried in the fine print are provisions that would give Marissa and Adrian complete control over every aspect of your financial life. They could sell your property, liquidate your investments, transfer funds between accounts, all without your consent or even your knowledge." Victor leaned forward. "What are our options?" Lila gestured to a stack of folders on her desk. "I've prepared multiple legal responses. A restraining order, preventing them from accessing any of Leonard's accounts. Civil fraud charges based on the unauthorized withdrawals Adrian has already made. A formal complaint to the state bar about the attorney who helped draft this power of attorney. There are clear ethical violations in how it was presented." She paused. "We have enough evidence right now to destroy them legally. The question is whether Leonard wants to proceed." I sat in silence for a long moment, considering the path before me. Legal victory would be satisfying. Restraining orders and fraud charges would stop Marissa's plans and perhaps even land her in prison, but it would not expose the truth. It would not force Adrian to see what his wife really was. It would not give my son the chance to choose his own soul over her manipulation. "I want more than legal victory," I said finally. "I want them to expose themselves completely. I want Adrian to see with his own eyes in a moment he cannot deny or explain away exactly who he married." Lila raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind? A test?" I looked at the power of attorney document, at the careful lies Marissa had constructed, and I felt something crystallize in my mind. They think I'm a confused old man sitting on a modest pension. They think they're close to getting everything. What if I let them believe they've won? Victor understood immediately. You want to give them what they think they want. I want to show them a fake will. A document that appears to leave everything to Adrian, my savings, my personal property, the small amount they believe I have. No mention of the hotel shares the rental properties the trust's Grace created. Just a simple will that makes Adrian my sole heir. I met Lila's eyes. If I present this as a peace offering, as an attempt to reconcile before I die, Marissa will not be able to resist. She'll push Adrian to accept it immediately before I change my mind. And the trap? Lila asked. Emily. The will I show them will leave nothing to my granddaughter. Not a college fund, not a keepsake, nothing. Any parent who truly loved their child would refuse to accept a will that disinherits her completely, but if they sign off on it enthusiastically, if they celebrate cutting their own daughter out of her grandfather's estate, I let the implication hang in the air. Lila nodded slowly. It proves they care only about the money. It's documented evidence of their priorities. She was already reaching for a legal pad. I can draft something convincing. We'll mark it clearly as draft for discussion to avoid any legal complications. It will suggest you're leaving your entire estate to Adrian while making no mention of assets they don't know about. They'll see what they want to see, Victor added. Greed blinds people to everything except the prize in front of them. We spent the next 2 hours crafting the document. Lila was meticulous, creating a will that appeared legitimate while remaining legally meaningless. The language was vague enough to be interpreted broadly, savings and personal property, while omitting any reference to the trust the hotel shares or the rental properties that constituted the vast majority of my actual wealth. When she finished, I held a document that looked like the key to a modest inheritance, but was actually worthless paper. That afternoon, I brought Emily into the plan. She arrived at my apartment still shaken by everything she had learned over the past week. But there was steel in her eyes that reminded me of her grandmother. When I explained what I intended to do, her face fell. "You're pretending to cut me out, Grandpa? I don't care about the money, but... Sweetheart." I took her hands in mine. "Your grandmother made sure you're protected no matter what happens. The real will, the trusts, everything, it all goes to you. This fake document is just a test for your parents. If they truly love you, they'll refuse to sign a will that gives them everything and leaves you with nothing. They'll insist that you be included, that your future be protected." Emily's expression shifted from hurt to understanding, and then to something harder. "And if they don't refuse, if they're happy to take everything and leave me nothing, then we'll know exactly who they are, and so will everyone else." She was quiet for a moment, processing the weight of what I was asking her to witness. Her own parents failing a test of basic decency. Her own mother choosing greed over her daughter's welfare. It was a terrible thing to ask a 16-year-old to face. But Emily had already seen more of Marissa's true nature than anyone else in the family. She had gathered the evidence herself. She knew what was at stake. "I'll play along," she said finally. "I'll act upset when I find out about the will. I'll make them think I'm on their side, angry at you for cutting me out. That way they'll let their guard down completely." I pulled her into an embrace, proud of her courage and heartbroken that she needed it. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you." That evening I sent a text to Adrian. My fingers were steady as I typed the words that would set everything in motion. "Son, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe we should talk about the future. I'm working on my will, and I'd like the family's input. Dinner at Marchetti's this Saturday. All of us. It's time to settle things." I watched the screen waiting. Minutes passed. Then for the first time in months, my phone displayed a response from my son. "We'll be there, Dad." Marchetti's was the kind of restaurant where old money came to be seen and new money came to pretend. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths, and the soft murmur of conversation blended with classical music playing from hidden speakers. I had chosen this venue deliberately. It was elegant enough to make Marissa feel comfortable, public enough to ensure witnesses, and familiar enough to the staff that Victor's friend, a waiter named Marco, who owed Victor several favors, could work our table without raising suspicion. I arrived early, dressed in a slightly rumpled suit that I'd worn to Grace's funeral 5 years ago. The effect was intentional. A widower who had not updated his wardrobe, a man clinging to the past, someone whose best days were clearly behind him. I asked the hostess the same question twice about our reservation, letting confusion cloud my face until she guided me to the table with the gentle patience people reserve for the elderly and infirm. Marissa and Adrian arrived precisely on time. She was stunning in a burgundy dress that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. Her hair perfect, her makeup flawless, her smile radiating a warmth that did not reach her calculating eyes. Adrian wore a tailored suit and the expression of a man who desperately wanted to be anywhere else. He kissed my cheek with mechanical affection, then took his seat beside his wife, their chairs positioned slightly closer to each other than to me. Emily came last, playing her role with a skill that broke my heart. She slumped into her chair without greeting anyone, her face set in the sullen mask of a teenager who had been dragged somewhere against her will. When Marissa asked how school was going, Emily shrugged and muttered something about it being fine. The tension between them was convincing, because it was real. Emily had spent 16 years watching her mother manipulate everyone around her, and the resentment did not need to be manufactured. Dinner proceeded with excruciating politeness. Marissa dominated the conversation, talking about her latest business ventures, their recent vacation to Europe, the renovations they were planning for their kitchen. I nodded along occasionally, asking her to repeat something, letting my attention wander visibly before snapping back with apologies. Each small performance of confusion made Marissa's smile grow wider. She thought she was watching her prey weaken. She had no idea she was the one being hunted. Marco served us efficiently, his movements positioning him perfectly to capture our conversation on the small recording device concealed in his vest pocket. Victor had assured me the audio quality would be excellent. Every word spoken at this table would be preserved for whatever came next. When dessert arrived, tiramisu for the table, though I barely touched mine, I reached into my jacket and produced the document Lila had prepared. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it, a performance so convincing that even I almost believed I was nervous. "I've been getting my affairs in order," I said, smoothing the pages on the table. "At my age, a man has to think about these things. I wanted your input before I finalize anything." Marissa's eyes locked onto the document like a predator spotting wounded prey. "Of course, Dad. We're happy to help." I slid the papers toward Adrian. "This is a draft of my will. I've left everything to you, son. My savings, my personal property, whatever I have when the time comes. Marissa is listed as secondary beneficiary in case anything happens to you." I paused, watching their faces. "Emily is mentioned for some sentimental items, your grandmother's jewelry, some photo albums, things like that." Adrian scanned the document, and I watched relief wash over his features like water over stone. He had been expecting a confrontation, accusations, anger. Instead, his father was handing him an inheritance. Marissa leaned over his shoulder, reading quickly, and the smile that spread across her face was genuine for the first time all evening. She could barely contain her satisfaction. "Dad, this is very wise," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Emily is so young. She doesn't need the burden of managing finances at her age. We'll take care of her, of course. You don't need to worry about that." Neither of them questioned why their own daughter was being left with nothing of material value. Neither suggested that perhaps Emily deserved a college fund, a small inheritance, some acknowledgement that she was part of this family too. They simply accepted a document that enriched themselves and abandoned their child without a moment's hesitation. I pressed further, needing to be certain. "What about Emily's college fund? Should I set something aside specifically for her education?" Marissa waved her hand as if brushing away an insect. "We'll handle Emily's future, Dad. You don't need to complicate things. The fewer complications in these documents, the better for everyone when the time comes." She said it so casually, "when the time comes," as if my death were simply an item on her calendar, an appointment she was eager to keep. Across the table, Emily gripped her napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white, but she kept her face neutral, her eyes fixed on her untouched dessert. She was hearing her own parents dismiss her future without a second thought, and she was staying silent because she understood what was at stake. My brave, brilliant granddaughter was watching her family fail a test they did not know they were taking. After dinner, as we gathered our coats in the restaurant's elegant foyer, I pulled Adrian aside. Marissa was distracted by her phone, already texting someone, probably her lawyer, already planning how to accelerate everything now that the will was in sight. "Son, I want to do something special," I said quietly. "A family gathering next Sunday. Everyone together. I've invited some old friends who want to see us, people who knew your mother, people who care about this family." Adrian nodded eagerly, still glowing from the promise of inheritance. "That sounds wonderful, Dad. We'll be there." "Good." I held his gaze, and for just a moment I let the mask slip. My eyes turned cold and my voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "There are some things that need to be said, Adrian, some people who deserve to hear the truth." He did not notice the change. He was too busy dreaming of money that would never be his. The week that followed was a masterclass in predatory patience. Marissa called me every day sometimes, twice her voice, sweet with concern that curdled in my ears like spoiled milk. She asked how I was sleeping, whether I was eating properly, if I had remembered to take medications I didn't actually need. Each question was designed to establish a pattern, the dutiful daughter-in-law checking on her declining father-in-law, building a case file of confusion and frailty that could later be presented to doctors and judges. On Wednesday, she escalated. "Dad, I've been thinking about your safety," she said, her tone dripping with manufactured worry. "Living alone at your age in that apartment with all those stairs, it's really not practical anymore. We've been looking into some options for you. There's a lovely assisted living facility in Vermont, beautiful grounds, excellent medical staff, and it's so peaceful there. You could relax and let professionals take care of you. Vermont. The same state where Thomas Harris had spent 14 years in isolation, abandoned by the daughter who had stolen everything he owned. Marissa was not even creative enough to choose a different location for her second victim. I played along, letting my voice waver with uncertainty. Vermont? That's so far away. I don't know anyone there. That's the point, Dad. A fresh start. No stress, no responsibilities. You've earned some rest. She paused, and I could hear the calculation in her silence. Have you had a chance to sign those papers we left with you? The power of attorney. It would make the transition so much easier if we could handle the details for you. I told her I was still thinking about it, still confused by all the legal language. She sighed with poorly concealed frustration and promised to send Adrian over to help me understand. But Emily was already one step ahead. That same evening, she arrived at my apartment with a new recording on her phone captured just hours earlier. Her hands shook as she played it for me. Marissa's voice filled the room, sharp and commanding. Just be patient. Once he signs the power of attorney, we control everything. Then we get the doctors to certify early dementia. I know someone who helped before, and we can move him whenever we want. He'll be grateful eventually. They always are. Adrian's reply was weak, uncertain. Marissa, he's my father. Your father is a stubborn old man sitting on money we need. Her voice turned cold. Do you want to save your company or not? We're drowning in debt, Adrian. You're gambling my investments, the lifestyle we've built. It all collapses without that inheritance. So stop being sentimental and start being practical. The recording ended. Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I pulled her into an embrace. You have nothing to apologize for. You're the bravest person in this family. The final preparations came together like pieces of a puzzle Grace had designed years ago. Lila confirmed the guest list for Sunday. Victor would attend as a family friend, his presence unremarkable to anyone who did not know his true role. Evelyn would bring Grace's video, the message from beyond that my wife had recorded for exactly this moment. A court reporter named Sandra, a trusted colleague of Lila's, would be present to document everything that transpired, creating a legal record that could withstand any future challenge. And then there was the final guest. Victor had spent the week tracking him down, cutting through bureaucratic obstacles and medical privacy barriers with a determination born of personal debt. Thomas Harris, 78 years old, resident of Shady Pines Nursing Facility for 14 years. Marissa's father, the man she had told everyone was dead. I spoke with Thomas on the phone Thursday evening. His voice was thin but clear, his mind sharp despite everything his daughter had done to convince the world otherwise. She told people I died, he asked, and I heard the tremor of old pain beneath his words. She told her husband, her daughter, everyone who might have asked. A long silence. Then I'll come. I'll tell them everything. She took my home, my savings, my dignity. She put me in this place and never looked back. His voice hardened. It's time she answered for it. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold winter clouds pressing low against the city. I dressed in my best suit, the same one I had worn to Grace's funeral 5 years ago, and spent a long moment adjusting my tie in the mirror. The man looking back at me was 72 years old, weathered by loss and betrayal, but his eyes were clear and determined. Today was not about revenge. Today was about truth. I placed Grace's photograph on the mantel, positioning it so she could see the entire room. Watch over us today, my love, I whispered. Give me the strength to do what needs to be done. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Victor's car pulling up, followed by Lila's sedan. Behind them, a medical transport van, Thomas Harris, arriving with his nurse. The pieces were falling into place. In 1 hour, Marissa Carlton would walk through my door expecting a simple family brunch, a chance to push me closer to signing away my autonomy. She had no idea that her past, present, and future were about to collide in this small apartment, witnessed by everyone she had ever betrayed. The guests arrived in careful sequence, each entrance choreographed to build toward the moment of revelation. Victor came first, positioning himself near the door with the quiet alertness of a man prepared for anything. Evelyn followed, carrying a small bag that contained Grace's final message. Lila and her court reporter colleague Sandra arranged themselves near the window, legal pads ready, their presence unremarkable to anyone who did not know what they were documenting. Thomas Harris remained in the spare bedroom with his nurse waiting for his cue. Adrian and Marissa arrived at 11 o'clock sharp. She swept into my apartment wearing a cream-colored dress and a smile designed to project warmth she did not feel. Her eyes scanned the room, noting the unfamiliar faces with momentary confusion, before dismissing them as elderly friends of no consequence. "Dad, what a lovely gathering," she said, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. "I didn't realize you were inviting so many people." "Old friends," I replied. "People who knew Grace, people who care about this family." Adrian shook hands with Victor without recognition, then settled onto the couch beside his wife. Emily sat apart from them, her face carefully neutral, her hands folded in her lap. The atmosphere was tense beneath its veneer of politeness, like the pressure before a storm breaks. We made small talk for 10 minutes. Marissa complimented my apartment, asked about my health, mentioned again how wonderful that Vermont facility sounded. I nodded and smiled and let her believe everything was proceeding according to her plan. Then the doorbell rang. I rose slowly, steadying myself on the arm of my chair with a performance of frailty I no longer needed to maintain. "That must be our last guest," I said. "Someone very special." I opened the door to reveal a frail elderly man in a wheelchair, a nurse standing behind him. Thomas Harris was thinner than the photographs Emily had found, his white hair wispy and his hands spotted with age. But his eyes were sharp and clear as they fixed on the woman sitting across my living room, the daughter who had abandoned him 14 years ago. Marissa's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The confident predator who had spent weeks planning my destruction sat frozen like a deer caught in headlights she had never expected to see. "Dad." The word escaped her lips as a whisper, as if speaking louder might make this impossible moment more real. Thomas Harris wheeled himself into the room, his nurse guiding him to a position where everyone could see him clearly. He looked at Marissa with an expression that held no warmth, no forgiveness, only the cold clarity of a man who had spent 14 years waiting for this reckoning. "Hello, Marissa," he said. "I'm not dead after all," surprised. The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian stared at his wife with dawning horror. Emily leaned forward, her eyes wide. Victor and Lila watched with the focused attention of witnesses who understood the significance of every word about to be spoken. Thomas began to speak, and his voice carried the weight of years of isolation and betrayal. "After my wife died, my daughter came to me with paperwork. She said it would protect my assets, make things easier if anything happened to me. I trusted her. She was my child." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Within 6 months, she had sold my house, my car, everything I owned. She told my neighbors I had severe dementia and could not care for myself. I didn't. My mind was fine. She put me in a nursing home 300 miles from anyone who knew me and told the facility I had no other family." His eyes found Emily, and tears began to slide down his weathered cheeks. "She told me my granddaughter was better off not knowing me. She said Emily would only be confused by having a grandfather with memory problems." He reached out a trembling hand toward the girl who had thought he was dead. "You must be Emily. You look just like your grandmother." Emily was across the room before anyone could react, dropping to her knees beside his wheelchair and wrapping her arms around him. "I thought you died before I was born," she sobbed. "She told me you were gone. I never knew." Thomas held his granddaughter, this child he had been denied for 16 years, and looked at Marissa with something beyond anger. "You took everything from me. My home, my dignity, my family. You erased me from existence so you could steal what little I had, and you never even looked back." I stood and faced Marissa directly. Her composure had shattered completely. She sat rigid on my couch, her face a mask of shock and fury, her hands gripping the cushions as if they were the only things keeping her from flying apart. "You did it to your own father," I said, my voice steady. "And you plan to do the same to me. We have the recordings, your phone calls, your conversations with Adrian about dementia doctors and nursing homes. We have the documents, the power of attorney designed to steal my autonomy. We have the witnesses." I gestured to the room. "Everyone here knows exactly what you are." Marissa finally found her voice. "This is insane. You're all insane. Dad was sick. He needed care." "I wasn't sick." Thomas's voice cut through her protest like a blade. "I was trusting. There's a difference. I raised my hand, silencing her. Before we discuss consequences, there's someone else who deserves to speak. I nodded to Evelyn, who connected the flash drive to my television with hands that trembled slightly. My wife recorded this message before she died. She wanted you to hear it when the truth finally came out. The screen flickered and then Grace appeared. Grace filmed in her final weeks, thin and tired, but radiating a determination that death itself could not extinguish. Marissa made a strangled sound, but no one moved to comfort her. If you're watching this, Grace began, her voice clear despite her illness, then Marissa has finally shown who she really is. I recorded this because I knew this day would come. I watched you for years, Marissa. I watched you isolate my son from his father. I documented every manipulation, every lie, every calculated cruelty. But what destroyed any hope I had for you was what I discovered about your father. Grace paused, and even on the screen I could see the steel in her eyes. Yes, I found Thomas. I've been paying for his upgraded care anonymously for 5 years. Better food, better medical attention, small comforts that his own daughter denied him. Because someone had to protect him from you, Marissa, just as I'm now protecting Leonard from you. Marissa started to scream, a sound of pure rage and terror, but Grace's final words silenced her completely. And now my husband will reveal what you never knew existed. The screen went dark and Grace's face disappeared, but her presence lingered in the room like a protective force that death could not diminish. I looked at Marissa, this woman who had spent nearly 2 decades dismantling my family and felt nothing but cold resolve. It was time to finish what my wife had started. Lila, I said. My attorney stepped forward, a folder of documents in her hands. She moved with the practiced confidence of someone who had prepared for this moment with meticulous care. Sandra, the court reporter, positioned herself to capture every word. Mrs. Carlton, Lila began, her voice carrying the weight of legal authority, you came into this family believing you had found an easy mark, an elderly widower with modest savings, a weak husband you could manipulate, and a father-in-law too kind to see you for what you really are. She opened the folder. You were wrong about everything. Lila laid out the documents on my coffee table, each one a brick in the wall Grace had built to protect me. 5 years ago, Grace Grayson worked with estate attorneys to restructure her husband's assets into irrevocable trusts. These trusts are legally impenetrable. No family member can access, challenge, or claim any portion of them without meeting specific conditions. Marissa's eyes darted to the papers, trying to understand what she was seeing. What assets? He lives in a 2-bedroom apartment. He drives a 15-year-old car. Leonard Grayson owns a 15% stake in the Grandview Hotel chain, Lila continued. Acquired as an early investor 20 years ago and held in a separate LLC. He owns 2 rental properties, generating substantial passive income. His total portfolio is valued at over $2.3 million. She let that number hang in the air. None of it appears on any document you have ever seen. None of it can be touched by you or your husband, ever. The color had returned to Marissa's face, but now it was the red of fury rather than the white of shock. That's impossible. We would have known. You knew only what Grace wanted you to know. She understood exactly what you were, and she spent her final years ensuring you would never profit from your cruelty. Lila pulled out another document. The true beneficiary of Leonard's estate is the Emily Grace Trust, named for his granddaughter and his late wife. Leonard serves as trustee until Emily reaches 21. And there is a critical clause that applies to every family member. She read directly from the page. Any person who demonstrates financial exploitation, abuse, or mistreatment of Leonard Grayson shall be permanently excluded from any inheritance or beneficial interest. Marissa shot to her feet. This is illegal. These documents are fraudulent. Adrian, say something. We'll contest this in court. But Adrian was not listening. He sat frozen on the couch, staring at a piece of paper Lila had quietly handed him moments earlier. His face had gone pale, and his hands trembled as he held the single page covered in familiar handwriting. His own handwriting. What is that? Marissa demanded. Adrian, what are you looking at? Emily spoke from across the room, her voice quiet but steady. I found it in your desk drawer, Mom, hidden in the back behind your tax documents. You kept it for 3 years. Adrian began to read aloud, his voice cracking with every word. Dear Dad, I'm sorry for disappearing from your life. Marissa said it was better this way, that you and I needed distance, that our relationship was unhealthy, but she was wrong. I miss you every day. I know I've been a coward. I know I've let you down, I don't know how to escape what my life has become, but I wanted you to know." His voice broke completely. "I never stopped loving you. Your son, Adrian." The letter I had never received. The apology I had waited years to hear. My son had written it 3 years ago, had tried to reach out, had wanted to repair what Marissa had broken. And she had intercepted it, hidden it, let both of us believe the other did not care. Adrian looked up at his wife, and I saw something shatter behind his eyes. "You kept this from me. For 3 years. You made me believe he never responded because he didn't want to hear from me. You told me he was too angry, too stubborn, that I should stop trying." Tears streamed down his face. "I thought my father hated me. I thought he had given up on me, and the whole time he never even knew I reached out." Marissa's composure crumbled into desperation. She lunged toward the door, but Victor was already there, his broad frame blocking the only exit. She spun back toward the room, searching for another escape, finding none. Lila stepped forward, holding up her phone. "We're not finished, Mrs. Carlton. The unauthorized withdrawals from Leonard's account total $47,000. That constitutes theft. Combined with the evidence of your conservatorship plans, the recorded phone calls, the emails, your own admissions about obtaining false dementia diagnoses, we have grounds for criminal elder abuse charges." Marissa's face contorted with rage and fear. "You can't prove any of that. We have recordings from your own home obtained by your daughter. We have testimony from Thomas Harris about what you did to him. We have documentation of every lie you told." Lila held up her phone. "And we have the recording from Marchetti's restaurant where you enthusiastically approved a will that disinherited your own child. You have 2 choices. Sign the documents renouncing all claims to the Grayson estate and agreeing to repay the stolen funds. Or we proceed with criminal charges and let a jury decide your fate." Marissa looked around the room at the father she had abandoned, the daughter she had betrayed, the husband whose eyes now held only disgust, the witnesses who had documented her every crime. For the first time since I had known her, she had no move left to make. Marissa stood in the center of my living room like a cornered animal, her eyes darting between the documents Lila held and the door Victor still blocked. I watched the calculations flicker across her face, the desperate search for an angle, an escape, a way to salvage something from the wreckage of her schemes. When she finally accepted that no such option existed, she did what predators always do when trapped. She turned on the weakest member of her own pack. "Fine," she spat, snatching the pen from Lila's hand. "I'll sign your papers, but you should know—" She jabbed a finger toward Adrian. "He's the one who accessed the account. He's the one who needed the money. I was just trying to save his failing business. Everything I did was to protect this family." Adrian stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. The woman he had married, the woman he had allowed to separate him from his father, the woman whose voice he had obeyed for nearly 20 years. She was throwing him to the wolves without a moment's hesitation. "You told me to do it," he said slowly, his voice hollow. "You said it was a loan. You said Dad had plenty saved and wouldn't even notice. You said, I said what I needed to say to get you to act like a man for once." Marissa signed each document with sharp, angry strokes, not bothering to read the terms she was agreeing to. Renunciation of all claims, agreement to repay the stolen funds, waiver of any future contact with Leonard Grayson. She threw down the pen when she finished. "There, are we done?" Victor stepped forward, his phone in hand. "Not quite. I thought you should know the video from the hotel restaurant has been connected to your real identity. Someone recognized you from your business website. The comments section is very interested in learning more about the woman who publicly humiliated an elderly man." Marissa's face went rigid. "Your former business partners have been contacted by journalists," Victor continued. 3 of them have already issued statements distancing themselves from you. Your clients are canceling contracts, and someone I genuinely don't know who leaked information about your father's situation to a reporter at the city newspaper. He held up his phone, showing a headline that had posted within the hour. "Socialite who publicly humiliated father-in-law has secret elderly abuse history. It's trending." The sound that escaped Marissa's throat was not quite human. She grabbed her purse and pushed past Victor, who stepped aside to let her go. She did not look back at her husband. She didn't acknowledge her daughter. She simply fled, leaving behind the ruins of a life built on manipulation and cruelty. In the silence that followed her departure, Emily stood. My granddaughter. This brave young woman who had gathered evidence against her own mother, who had played her role perfectly. who had reunited with a grandfather she thought was dead, walked to the center of the room and faced what remained of her family. "I'm going to live with Grandpa," she announced. "I'm 16. I can petition the court for custody modification, and after everything that's happened today, I don't think anyone will argue against it." She looked at Thomas Harris, still seated in his wheelchair, with tears on his weathered cheeks. "And I'm going to get to know my real grandfather, the one you told me was dead." Then she turned to Adrian, and her expression softened with something that might have been pity. "Dad, I don't hate you. I know she controlled you. I know you were weak, not evil. But I can't watch you be her puppet anymore. I can't live in that house and pretend everything is normal." She took a breath. "If you ever want to be my father again, really be my father, you know where to find me." She walked to my side and took my hand. Adrian did not stop her. He sat on my couch with his head bowed, a broken man surrounded by the debris of choices he could never unmake. 3 days passed. Emily moved into my spare bedroom. Thomas Harris was transferred to a care facility 20 minutes from my apartment. Full costs, covered by the Emily Grace Trust exactly as Grace would have wanted. I visited him every afternoon, and we sat together talking about the years that had been stolen from both of us. On the third night, just before midnight, there was a knock at my door. Rain hammered against the windows and thunder rolled in the distance. I opened the door to find Adrian standing on my doorstep, soaking wet, a single suitcase at his feet. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion and shame. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking on the word. "I left her. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But," he swallowed hard, "can I come in?" I let him in that night. I gave him dry clothes and a cup of coffee and a place to sleep on my couch. But I did not give him forgiveness, not yet. Forgiveness, I had learned, was not a gift to be handed out freely. It was a destination reached only through a long journey of accountability and change. 6 months have passed since that rainy night. I'm writing this from the porch of a modest house near the ocean, the house Grace and I had dreamed of retiring to during all those years of sacrifice and struggle. The sound of waves reaches me through the salt-tinged air, and seabirds wheel overhead against a sky painted in shades of amber and rose. After 72 years of building things for others, I finally built a life for myself. Emily lives with me now. She transferred to a local high school and has thrived in ways that fill me with pride every day. Her grades are excellent. She has made friends who know nothing of her mother's cruelty or her family's public disgrace. She is preparing for college writing application essays about resilience and the grandmother she never met, but whose love still shapes her life. Every weekend she drives to visit Thomas Harris at his new care facility, a place with gardens and good food and staff who treat him with the dignity his own daughter denied him. They are building the relationship Marissa stole from them, one conversation at a time. I have established a charitable foundation in Grace's name. The Grace Grayson Elder Protection Fund provides legal assistance to elderly people facing financial exploitation by family members. Victor serves on the board. Lila handles the legal work pro bono. Every person we help is a testament to what Grace understood better than anyone, that the elderly are not burdens to be managed but treasures to be protected. Adrian is on his own journey now. He filed for divorce the week after that night in my apartment, and Marissa did not contest it. She had already fled the state. Her reputation destroyed her business connections, severed her schemes, exposed to public scrutiny. Last I heard, she was living somewhere on the West Coast, trying to rebuild under a different name. I do not think about her often. She is no longer my concern. My son attends therapy twice a week, working through years of manipulation and the codependency that made him vulnerable to a predator like Marissa. He took a job at a small accounting firm. Nothing glamorous, nothing prestigious, just honest work for honest pay. He lives in a modest apartment and sends me a check every month, slowly repaying the money he took from my account. I never asked him to do this. He insisted. He visits me once a month. We sit on this porch and watch the waves and talk about things that matter. Grace, Emily, the bridges I built, the life he is trying to reconstruct. I made my terms clear from the beginning. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Trust is not rebuilt in a day. He is my son, and I love him. But we start over slowly, honestly, and only as long as he keeps choosing integrity over convenience. Last week, Emily had a conversation with her father that she shared with me afterward. She told Adrian that when she turns 21, she will have access to everything Grace left in the trust. She told him that she has decided if and only if he completes his therapy, stays divorced from Marissa, and rebuilds genuine relationships with both of us, she will share part of that inheritance with him. Not because he deserves it, she said, but because Grandma believed in second chances. This is my choice, she told him. Grandma protected me so I could protect this family's future. I'm starting with you. I have never been prouder of anyone in my life. The sun is setting now, painting the ocean in colors that remind me of Grace's favorite scarves. Emily is inside making dinner. She has become an excellent cook. Another surprise gift of these unexpected months. Adrian will arrive tomorrow for his monthly visit. The three of us will share a meal and perhaps take a walk on the beach, and I will watch my son and granddaughter slowly learn to trust each other again. I pick up the photograph of Grace that sits on the table beside my chair. She smiles at me from behind the glass, frozen in a moment of joy I will carry with me until we meet again. You saved me, Grace, I whisper to her image. Even after you were gone, you saved me. I set down the photograph and look toward the horizon where the last light of day melts into the endless sea. The past year held betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, but also revelation, justice, and renewal. I did not lose my family. I finally discovered which parts of it were worth keeping. I smile at the ocean and speak the truth I have earned through fire. I didn't lose a family. I found myself. And that's worth everything. Thank you for joining me on Leonard's journey from humiliation to healing, from betrayal to triumph. His story reminds us that age is never a weakness, that quiet strength can overcome the loudest cruelty, and that love, true love, finds ways to protect us even from beyond the grave. Grace Grayson could not be there in person to shield her husband from Marissa's schemes, but she built a fortress of foresight and devotion that proved stronger than any predator's plans. If you know someone who has faced mistreatment from family members, someone who has been made to feel like a burden when they deserve respect and dignity, please share this story with them. Let them know they are not alone. Let them know that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. And let them know that it is never too late to find the people who truly deserve your love. I would love to hear from you. Has anyone in your life ever underestimated you the way Marissa underestimated Leonard? Have you witnessed the quiet heroism of someone protecting their family from beyond expectations? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your stories matter, and this community grows stronger every time we lift each other up. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bonds that hold families together. Until next time, remember Leonard's final words. Sometimes you do not lose a family, you simply find yourself. And that discovery is worth everything.